Okay, I think we need to set the record straight here, folks.
Why? Banning trans people wasn't enough for you? Now you want to force records to be straight, too?
About Donald Trump and, condemning him for some of the comments he made with respect to Russia and Ukraine, calling him Putin's pawn, and how dare he say that the Ukraine shouldn't get their land back.
I don't see what needs to be said straight there. That is all dead on. Putin's puppet absolutely should be condemned, preferably to the gallows, for the traitorous act of suggesting that Ukraine should give up their land to their invaders and our adversaries.
How do you propose that Ukraine does get their land back?
Overwhelming firepower, mostly.
Do you want the U.S. to engage in another military conflict?
No, I don't. That's literally the whole fucking reason I want to make sure Ukraine, the ones that are currently in the military conflict, so we don't have to be, have enough firepower to get their land back. Because, if they don't successfully push back Putin, Poland's next, and that's how world wars happen. Seriously, don't you remember? We already went through all this the last time Russia invaded Poland with Germany, and then there was tanks and bombs, and Tom Hanks was there for some reason. And that was before Russia had the ability to drop the power of the sun on people. So all I'm saying is, it's probably a good thing to give Ukraine a little bit of weapons now, so that doesn't happen again.
I think you schmucks need a history lesson in why we're here in the first place.
First off, if you're doing a cringy truck rant, you're not allowed to call other people schmucks. I don't make the rules, but them's the rules.
So I'm going to take you back in time to 1990, 1991.
So your history lesson is starting by going all the way back to the end of the USSR and skipping literally the first half century of all of the history that got us here. Cool. Sure, this is going to go great for you.
The end of the Cold War, the reunification of Germany, and that's when the USSR dissolved. This all happened between Reagan and Gorbachev.
So the 1991 reunification of Germany, which happened as a result of the revolutions of 1989, were done between Gorbachev and Reagan, who was on his way out of office in 1988. It makes perfect sense if you just don't think about it, or understand how time works, or own a calendar.
To end the Cold War, they made an agreement to allow Germany to unify.
Now, once again, just because, I'm a schmuck who needs a history lesson, I want to make sure I'm writing my notes down properly. The Treaty of Final Settlement, the treaty that reunified Germany, which I noticed you didn't mention by name, but I'm sure that was just a slip and you know all about it. It was drafted and signed by East Germany, West Germany, the United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, and the United States in 1990 and went into effect in 1991. So that agreement, that's the agreement you're talking about, right? That was apparently exclusively made between Gorbachev and Reagan, who hadn't been president for 2 years. Did I get it correct, Discount Anderson Cooper, or am I missing something?
The U.S. and NATO promised not to move 1 inch closer to their borders.
They quite literally did not.
This is a fact.
No, it's definitely not.
This actually happened.
No, it didn't, and you just repeating that it's a fact that happened doesn't make it a fact that happened. There is not a single line in that treaty or any treaty where the U.S. or NATO agrees to limit eastward expansion of NATO. Not one. That's a fact. That agreement didn't happen.
So, in standing with what the United States does when they give their word, they broke it.
Now look, I'm not gonna go out and say that the U.S. has the best history on keeping its promises, but once again, we can't break a promise we never fucking made. And even if we had, which we very much did not, the United States is not NATO. It is just a member of NATO. We can't unilaterally make decisions for NATO. So you can't blame the United States for an organization of 32 separate countries breaking a promise it never made. God, the layers of dumb here are many. It's like Inception, except instead of dreams within dreams, it's dumb within dumb that's got some more dumb inside of that. Basically, what I'm just trying to say right now is everything you've said so far is multi-dimensional levels of dumb.
Then we fast forward to 2014 and we see Crimea get annexed. This happened under your favorite president, Obama's watch. Interesting, isn't it?
Not particularly.
Why?
Probably the same reason they invaded Georgia in 2008 when Bush was president. Now, because the former KGB agent running Russia seems to want to restore the Russian Empire to its former glory.
Because they were dangling the carrot to Ukraine to become part of NATO.
It's appropriate you look like an elf, because every story you seem to tell is a fucking fairy tale. Ukraine's been begging to join NATO for decades, like they requested formally in 2002. NATO said no because they didn't want to provoke Russia. They requested again in 2008. Then by 2010, Ukraine had pretty much given up trying to join NATO, and they're like, you know what, it's fine, we've got some good agreements with NATO, but we're not going to be a part of NATO, we don't see any reason to join NATO and provoke Russia. And then in 2014, they had some political turmoil within Ukraine, and they found out Russia was exploiting that, and Russian troops were operating within Ukraine. And then Russia went ahead and annexed Crimea anyway, even though Ukraine had not joined NATO. NATO rejected Ukraine's attempts to join NATO, and then Ukraine said, you know what, it's fine, we won't join NATO.
And think logically here, folks.
That's a bold request from somebody who said with his full chest that a president from the 80s was negotiating international treaties of the 90s.
We always paint Russia as being the bad guy.
Yeah, suppressing freedom of speech, killing political opponents, meddling in foreign elections. That's some bad guy shit. And I'm not saying we don't partake in that on occasion as well, but 2 wrongs and all.
With the Ukraine becoming part of NATO,
which they didn't,
that would eat up Russia's warm water port. They wouldn't have any access to the Mediterranean.
They already don't. Do you own a map? Russia's way up here, and the Mediterranean's way down here. They don't have direct access to the Mediterranean, with or without Ukraine or Crimea.
And they wouldn't have any access to the Black Sea.
Once again, yes, they do. Russia's here. Here's Crimea, the little spot over here, and Russia still has all of this access to the Black Sea over here, even without Crimea.
They had no choice but to annex Crimea.
Yeah, they did have a choice. The choice was to not do it, the same way they had not been doing it since 1991.
We look at what's happened now. Again, the conversation starts of Ukraine becoming part of NATO.
Yeah, you know, when a country doesn't join NATO specifically so Russia doesn't invade them, and then Russia just decides to invade them anyway, it seems like a pretty good reason to consider maybe joining NATO.
Russia doesn't like that.
Yeah, well, maybe they shouldn't have been a dick then and annexed Crimea.
So they had no choice but to start this conflict.
Yes, they did. You know, they could have just not started the war. It's literally like the easiest thing to do. All you have to do to not do it is just not invade another country. Certainly a hell of a lot easier to do than rolling tanks and troops across your neighbor's border.
Nobody wanted it. Russia didn't want it.
Yes, they absolutely did want it. You want to know how I know? Because they did it. Look, all I'm saying is when you decide to invade a country unprovoked, it usually means that you wanted to invade the country. So, yeah, they wanted it.
Ukraine didn't want it.
Wow, guys, write this down. That was the first accurate thing this guy said this entire video. Broken clock and blind squirrels, am I right?
But the United States wanted it.
And he's back to being wrong again.
The United States, under Biden's watch, have been fueling this conflict where over 1 million people have died. It's disgusting. Nothing to do with Donald Trump. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, sure, that's true as long as you ignore the fact that Donald Trump has literally undermined all of our allies in favor of Russia, repeats Russian propaganda, talks about Putin like he's a schoolgirl who's got a crush, repeatedly tried blackmailing Ukraine for his own personal political aspirations, has private closed-door secret meetings with Putin, allows Russian state media into White House press conferences he kicked American media outlets out of. But aside from that, and like literally all of the other shit he's done to support and embolden Russia and undermine our allies, yeah, he's done nothing. Nothing whatsoever.
I don't necessarily like the guy. I'm Canadian.
Thank God. Here I was starting to get worried that the United States had completely cornered the market on morons. Glad to see Canada's still producing a few, and we're not the only country out here with some idiocracy extras running around.
But I will tell you, he cares about his people.
The guy who's cutting VA benefits for our veterans and Social Security for our old and disabled people and farm aid for the people who feed us. And the guy who on his first day in office took price controls off of prescription medication people need to live. Yeah, he really seems to care about all the people who are dying now because they can't afford insulin or inhalers. Guy who's firing all the transportation safety personnel while airplanes are falling out of the sky. Guy who plans on raising working class taxes to give himself and his rich buddies another tax cut. The guy who spent $152 million of our money to go golfing. The guy who spent $5 million to take a lap around Daytona. That's who you think cares about us. Have you seen a doctor recently? Because I think you have a concussion.
And he is not a warmonger. And he does not want to do this.
Not a warmonger. The motherfucker wants to invade Greenland. He's talking about making your country the 51st fucking state. He wants to turn Gaza into a hotel and casino. Fuck, he's been talking about re-invading Afghanistan. We literally just left. Look, I know it messes with your very pretty hair, but I think you need to start wearing your helmet all the time now, because I don't think your brain can sustain much more damage.
So you need to do your homework.
I did, and then I did yours for you, because clearly you didn't.
It literally, you can do this in an hour.
I get you're not the brightest October maple leaf in the Northland, but an hour? Buddy, it took me like 3 minutes to get all the information I needed for this video.
You need to stop getting your news from a stupid meme, because most of you don't know what you're talking about. Educate yourselves. You can do this for free. It's incredible. That's me rambling, but I'll tell you, I'm right in this.
And I'll tell you that you're not.
If you think I'm wrong, prove me wrong.
I just did, you know, with like the maps and the dates and everything, because I spent 3 minutes looking it up to prove you wrong. I also passed world history in high school and college, so like I knew you were wrong before I spent the 3 minutes looking up that you were wrong, but I just wanted to make sure that I had the dates and stuff right. Just because I wanted to avoid saying something stupid, like maybe a president from the 80s was negotiating treaties in the 90s. You know, that would have been awkward. I would have felt like a moron if I'd have done something like that.
I'm happy to engage you in a civil discussion on the matter.
Well, they're legless. I can't speak for all the other schmucks out there, but I think I'll pass on any more civil discussions that are this painfully, disingenuously stupid. Thanks, though.